Welcome to Care Rockstar Radio. I am your host, Kris Murray. Childcare leaders around the globe are breaking through challenges, leading the way in innovation, testing new best practices, and impacting children and families in a much more powerful and positive way than ever before. Each week, join me for interviews with early childhood leaders and experts that will leave you inspired to become the next childcare rockstar. Now, let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. My guest today is Mr. Ryan Hawk. He is the host of the Learning Leader Show, which is a top podcast, and I've listened to it a bunch. He has amazing guests, and we're going to dig in today to his story about why he created this learning leader, following this movement, this platform and podcast. And the title of our episode today is Why Lifelong Learning Makes You a Better Leader. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Ryan, and I'm going to also share with you a few highlights of this podcast before we dig in. So Ryan Hawk is a keynote speaker, author, advisor to executives, and the host of the Learning Leader Show, a podcast with millions of listeners in more than 150 countries. Forbes called the Learning Leader Show the most dynamic leadership podcast around. And Inc. magazine called the Learning Leader Show one of the 5 podcasts to make you a smarter leader. He's the author of Welcome to Management, How to Grow from Top Performer to Excellent Leader. And Forbes called his book, Welcome to Management, the best leadership book of 2020. Holy cow. I am very excited to bring Ryan to you. I have been familiar with him as a leadership leading voice and thought leader in his own right. He and I actually share a alumni, Miami University of Ohio. We both attended Miami. He's a little younger than me, so he was there after I was, but he was our star quarterback for a while until he had to compete with Ben Roethlisberger, quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, for the top spot at the Miami Redskins football team. And so he went to a different college, and he shares that story. And he shares, we talk football a little bit and talk about his experience trying to become an NFL player and everything he went through, and then how he pivoted in his career to more of a corporate life and then into entrepreneurship and leadership, and which is where he is today. He's a lifelong student of leadership. He rose to roles as a professional quarterback and vice president of sales at a multi-billion-dollar company. And he speaks regularly at Fortune 500 companies. He works with teams and players in the NFL, NBA, and NCAA. Very cool. And facilitates leadership circles that offer structured guidance and collaborative feedback to new and experienced leaders. So you all know that I'm a leadership junkie if you've listened to the podcast for any time at all. And we're here up to episode 70, which is pretty cool. Quickly on track to reach episode 100 because last week, we went to a weekly format. We used to be on a bi-weekly schedule, and we went to a weekly format. And we also went to an audio and video combined platform. So you could be watching this on YouTube, or you can be listening to it wherever you listen to podcasts. So without any further ado, let's dig right in and learn more about why it's important to always be sharpening your saw or working on staying open to learning as a leader. And Ryan Hawk is the guy that's going to give us the latest and greatest on what the world of leadership holds for early learning leaders and how you can apply today's leadership lessons to the world of ECE and beyond. All right, episode 70, let's dig in. All right, I am excited to welcome Mr. Ryan Hawk to the podcast. Ryan, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Kris. It's good to see you and talk with you.
I'm really excited. This is going to be, I think, some really good content. So where are you right now?
I'm in Dayton, Ohio. That's where
okay.
grew up and briefly left to go to 2 different colleges, all within Ohio. And then after college, moved down to Birmingham, Alabama. And once I was done playing football down there, I came back to Dayton, Ohio.
And I think we have an alma mater in common. Were you a Miami grad or Miami of Ohio?
I went to Miami out of high school and played there for 2 years. And I transferred after my second season playing at Miami because I happened to be there at the exact same time and play the exact same position as Ben Roethlisberger. So only one quarterback gets to play at a time. And the late, great Terry Hepner decided after a couple years of us battling it out that was not going to be me. And it seems like he made the right choice, unfortunately, at the time. And so after I lost the quarterback competition job to Ben at Miami, I then transferred to Ohio University, where I played then for my final years of eligibility, and was able to have a good time there.
Well, that's awesome. And we weren't planning to talk about football in the NFL, but did you try to pursue a path into the NFL?
Sure. Yeah. Many workouts. And when I didn't get signed by an NFL team, I then went briefly to the Canadian Football League and then spent 2 seasons playing in the Arena Football League with the hopes of, playing well enough to be noticed by an NFL team to get another shot. And that's what all of us in that league were trying to do, just like players in minor league baseball. Essentially, it's a similar type of a job. And then, roughly 1% of those players actually make it. And I was in the 99% there and did not. So it was fun though. It was great fun to experience professional sports after college being over, even if it didn't end up being in the NFL. But I learned a lot and draw a lot from those experiences, especially when I moved down to Birmingham, which was way outside of my normal comfort zone, and met a lot of incredible people and just really good life experiences that I can always think back to.
That's awesome. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey with, your brand of the Learning Leaders and the Learning Leader Show. How long have you been doing this work and how did you get here?
So I finished getting my MBA in 2013-14, and my company, LexisNexis at the time, paid for us to go back and get continued educational reimbursement. And so I was going to go back to school again, but I didn't love everything about going back and getting my graduate degree. And at the exact same time as that happened, Kris, I had a dinner, fortunately, was set up with a guy named Todd Wagner. Todd Wagner is and was Mark Cuban's business partner. Todd started broadcast.com with Mark, eventually sold it with Mark, and eventually became a billionaire with Mark. I met up with Todd, had a dinner, and learned about his story. And I thought, you know what? I would prefer to create my own form of a leadership PhD program by speaking directly with people like him, where I can choose my professors instead of being told what the curriculum is when I got my MBA. I would rather choose what the curriculum is and the teachers of that information. And so because of those things coming together, I thought, what if I did this, but also did it in public for all to hear the mistakes and fumblings that I will make along the way. And potentially they could learn along with me if they're listening. And so I'll publish it as a podcast. And that also then would create some sort of a platform so that other leaders who I wanted to speak with would perhaps want to talk to me. And that's how the Learning Leader Show was started more than 5 years ago. And now I've been very fortunate to meet my leadership heroes from all over the world and having more than 360 of those conversations over the past 5 years.
Yeah. So we were just talking before we hit the record button about your recent episode with John Maxwell, who is one of my personal heroes. And from your podcast, what stands out? Like, what were some of the 1 or 2 people that you've spoken to that were just like a life-changing or awe-inspiring time for you?
Yeah, he's one of them for sure. I spoke recently with Admiral William McRaven. He was in charge of the Bin Laden raid in Pakistan, and also rescuing Captain Phillips. So another military guy. Sticking with the military theme, I spoke with four-star General Stanley McChrystal and developed a good relationship with him, that so much so that he invited me to tour Gettysburg with him in the class that he teaches at Yale last year. And that was a surreal experience touring with those incredible people. And afterwards I thought, let me just swing for the fences here. And I asked him if he would write the foreword to my first book. Thinking, he'll probably say no because it's a big ask. And he said yes. And so now the foreword of my first book, Welcome to Management, is written by General Stanley McChrystal, which blows my mind when I think about it, because, I couldn't get a hold of guys like him a few years ago. And now we've built friendships. So I think as you could probably attest to through doing this, that's one of the coolest aspects of hosting a show, is the fact that you have the opportunity to build real relationships with your heroes. And I love that part of it.
Yeah, I do as well. Probably my peak is having Les Brown on the podcast.
Wow.
And that was cool. An amazing moment for me as well.
That's cool.
Yeah, really great. So what's something about you, maybe you might consider it to be a fun fact, that you can share with our listeners that not a lot of people know about you?
Well, after 5+ years and 360 episodes, there's not much to hide. I would say people know me pretty well. I mean, there's not many parts of what I do that's off limits. So yeah, I live in a home with 6 other girls, 1 being my wife and 5 being daughters. Wow. And I think that aspect is sometimes surprises people, I guess. But I would, it's such just a blessing and a joy, 99% of the time, I would say. There's that 1% where it's tough, but everybody deals with that. So that has kids at least. And I'd say that part is, for whatever reason, sometimes surprising, but the part that I feel just like this massive responsibility, and they're my ultimate why for why I do what I do, to inspire and lead and show them that, you could potentially create your own job, create your own way to make a living that is not a job rec or anything that's been posted within a company, but you can actually make your own business out of following your intellectual curiosity with great passion and rigor. And that's what I try to do. And so I think about these actions on a daily basis when I think about my family, because that's everything, and for me. So anyway, that's something I guess is interesting, but just my day-to-day normal life.
Well, that's a lot of girl energy.
Yeah.
In the house. What's the age range?
13 to 5.
Ooh, yeah, you are right in it. That is super fun. Super fun.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your focus on leaders with your Learning Leader show and applying it to our listeners. So our listeners are pretty much all leaders in the early learning space. So they're running preschools, they're building Montessori schools, and they are really laying the foundation, the building blocks, if you will, of learning and education from 0 to 6. Mm-hmm. And so talk a little bit about your drive to be a lifelong learner, or why is it important to stay fresh in your learning? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I have analyzed the leaders, teachers, coaches, bosses that I've looked up to the most over the years, and tried to deconstruct what is it about them that I really admired. And one of the core commonalities that I found that I admire about the best coaches in my life, the best leaders, the best bosses, is that they aggressively pursued their curiosity to learn more, to always be striving to get better, to develop a deeper understanding of the area in which they were working. And the bad bosses or bad teachers or bad coaches were the ones who knew it all. They had already figured it all out. They had all the answers, right? And none of the questions. And so when I kind of did that little deconstructive project to think about that, I thought, that's the type of person that I want to be. I want to follow what I'm most curious about. I want to dive deep on those topics with diverse group of people that are fascinating and tell interesting stories and want to help other people. And I've also seen the value of an incredible coach, of an incredible leader. The fact that Ron Ullery and Bob Gregg, when I was an 8th grader, were able and decided to say that I was going to be the starting quarterback as a freshman of our varsity team in big school football here in Ohio, and pushed me to levels of performance that I didn't think I was capable of. I really learned the value of incredible coaching at that time, and I thought that would be so rewarding and fulfilling if I could potentially play a role in doing that for other people, not necessarily on the football field, but just in life in general. And so when I think about those people, for me, I don't know if I could ever measure up to some of the great ones that I've been fortunate enough to have in my life. First and foremost, my mom and my dad, but I certainly think it's a worthy effort to try. And so that's what I think about on a daily basis is making impact and the wake left behind, because leaders, you impact a person, but if you do a good job, not only do you impact that one person, but you impact everyone in their sphere of influence. And so that ends up being a great number of people. And that's why it's so important to try to get this leadership thing right.
Yeah. So a couple things you said hit me with regard to the impact, and stated another way could be seen as wanting to be significant. And John Maxwell talks about significance and wanting to live. He knew he wanted to live a life of significance. And I probably also knew that was something important to me from a little girl, that I always said I wanted to make a difference. So that's showing up in people's lives and influencing them in a positive way and making a difference, and then living a life of significance. So those concepts are kind of all tied in. So talk a little bit about this notion of significance and being a difference maker. How has that framed your choices or just your journey over the last few years? Yeah,
I've heard the phrase, like, it's time to move from success to significance. My dad has told me that, as he's retired now and still consults and works on boards and gives keynote speeches. I like that thought of having some sort of understanding the responsibility and the role of being a leader, especially when you build I guess a community of people who are really into what you do, because you've consistently produced useful content that has made their life better. And now, this is my business. My full-time job is podcasting and all of the work that comes from the podcast. So to me, I sense and feel that significance is as a massive responsibility that someone has invested their most valuable asset, their time, in listening to what I do every single week or reading what I put out every single Monday. And then they want more. They want to hear from you. They want to learn more. They want to be a part of a community you may be building, and doing that and then kind of creating a product off of just an audience, really, is how this whole thing has come together. But I kind of stumbled into it. And that's the part where you start feeling some of the significance that comes along with it, and the responsibility to say, I need to remain consistent and deliver value and be there for people, over deliver on a consistent basis to help them. That's what I try to do. And I think that's, obviously there are moments where I fail and don't do a good job, but I try to take care of the controllables, right? The consistency is always there because I can control how consistent I am. I can't control necessarily how effective the messaging is, but I can control that I'm going to release a podcast every Sunday night at 7:00 and have for 5 years and will never miss. Or I'm going to send out an email every Monday morning at 9:00 Eastern for 207 weeks and never miss, no matter what happens. And we've had some different weird things going on, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Those things I can control, and I will do everything within my power to take care of the controllables. in order to be there for people who are now counting on it, and it helps them be a better leader in their life.
Mm-hmm. So thinking of significance and thinking of impact and making a difference, who is somebody that has had a huge impact on your life, and maybe somebody that was maybe a surprise, maybe reflecting back that you didn't really, because I think we say our parents a lot, and then coaches, teachers, but is somebody coming to mind for you that has had an impact on your life that maybe you didn't expect?
I guess the second part of the question maybe changes it. I mean, the first part of the question is absolutely my parents.
Right.
And I do think, though, it's important if you're a privileged person like I am, it is important to recognize that, and recognize, at least I believe, the responsibility that comes from being very privileged. If you grow up with a great mom and dad, and they're still your number one mentors to this day, which they are for me, and two incredible brothers, one older, one younger, that they still play a massive role in my life as friends and brothers and models of how to be a great husband and a great dad, just like my parents are for me. I that's not lost on me. I think about that and try to be grateful for that every single day, and the fact that not everyone is that lucky. And so for me, that's not it wasn't a surprise, because it's just the way it's always been. And it's also taught me of what it means to be a leader, that if we went to my dad and said, we want to go to the batting cage at 11 o'clock at night, he'll take us and put the coins in the machine. If we needed him to rebound while we're shooting free throws, he's there no matter what time. We need a weightlifting partner at 5 a.m, he's there. If we need someone to throw to in the backyard, he's there. So that's a big deal for me. Like, I learned that part of leadership is showing up. Your presence is required, not your presence as in what you give them on Christmas morning, but your presence actually being there. Your full focus presence is required in order to be an exceptional leader. And so that, like, seeing that modeled to us firsthand is had a massive influence on my life, both in the professional and business world, as well as, more importantly, at home as a husband and a dad. And so I would say that's not surprising, but that's critical for me. And I realize that I didn't do anything to deserve that. Nothing. I did nothing to deserve that, but I do want to make the most of it and understand the privilege there, and try to do everything I can to pass that on to others.
Right. So leadership is a big driver for me. I'm kind of a leadership junkie, and that's one of the reasons that I love your show and love following you. And people like John Maxwell and Tony Robbins and Tim Ferriss, and a lot of people come to mind when I think about leadership. But I would love to get your thoughts, thinking about our listeners who, their typical day is they wake up, they go into a preschool environment, they try not to get overwhelmed by their day, they lead teachers and they lead leaders. So they're leading directors and managers. And how they show up is everything, like what you just said. So being there, being present, and trying to stay positive, trying to drive positivity, especially during this time in getting to be, I'll call it a post-COVID environment or a during coronavirus environment. But what tips what have you learned in your journey that might be useful for early learning leaders, that things that maybe they can use to inform how they show up as a leader? And I know I didn't put this question on our Q&A, but I just think it's something that I would love to get your take on. So I hope I'm not throwing you for a loop.
I actually didn't read the Q&A. So
oh, good.
I wanted to come in completely fresh.
Oh, good.
From a prep process.
Great.
I would say, one, it's always good to realize the magnitude of your role, like have an understanding of just how powerful, and I mean this in a good way, because you can use power for good, and I want leaders to use that power for good. How powerful you are in a position like that, where you're literally molding the minds of our young people and molding the minds of the people who are going to lead them. If you're the owner or the principal and you have directors that report to you, that first, let's take a step back and understand the magnitude of that. And I think having that understanding can help you focus and help you have an understanding of the responsibility, so that it could probably create more of a care in what you are doing, because it is a vital, important role. We send our 5-year-old to Primrose School. I don't know if you're familiar with Primrose, if they exist all over the place, but so and we chose that. It's probably the most expensive school around here, but we chose it because it was evidenced by the owners of the school, who we had a sit down meeting with, as well as the teachers who were there. And it was evident that they had such a deep care for their students as they view them, even though they're 3, 4, 5-year-olds, deep care and understanding for the development of those kids. And for me, right, parents can have a lot of guilt. You drop your kids off at 7:45 or 8 o'clock in the morning and don't pick them up until 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. Sometimes both moms and dads can feel really guilty about that. But one thing that helps alleviate some of that is knowing that our child is in great hands, knowing that she's learning a lot, and not only learning a lot, but is cared for. And so when we went in there to interview them to say, should we send her here or somewhere else? And we see how much care and effort and curriculum and planning, and it was evident. And I remember during the interview process, we were meeting with the owner of the school, her and her husband. And as kids were walking by in the hallway, she was talking to each one by name and talking about, and so it was evident that this was not just a job for her and her husband. This was a calling. This is the passion. Now, certainly they make good money, and that's great. I'm happy for that. I want them to. Yeah. But it was more than just about a good business decision. It was about, you could tell that they cared deeply for those kids and their teachers that they were leading. And that meant a lot to us, where we thought, hey, this is what we have to do. Yes, it's more expensive, but it's worth it. I mean, we're putting the thing we care about the most in the whole world, we're sending her there every single day, 5 days a week. It was everything. So I would say, if you could show that to your teachers and show that to the parents who are considering their kids going there, that at least to me was critical in us making that decision.
I love that. And do you recall, as part of that process, learning more about their story and their why? Like, did they share with you, like, why we started this school, or what drives us and our passion, some of those kinds of things?
Absolutely. Right. It was, you could tell, being a former teacher themselves, and then kind of moving up. And so I love that aspect of, like, because if you choose to be a teacher of a 5-year-old, a preschool, or a kindergarten, or first grade, you're not choosing that profession for the money. And now teachers are underpaid. They should be paid more, especially we're all experiencing that now, since now we're the homeschool teachers and failing miserably. But I would say, though, they don't choose that for the money. They choose it because they feel like that is what they're supposed to do. That's what they want to do. Right. And so when you could hear that that's the motivation behind someone choosing to do that, I admire that. And that's where I want our children to go, is to be around people like that feel like this is what I was meant to do. And this is why I love it. And this is what I love about doing this job. And things are like, wow, okay. Like I think that is critical to hear.
Yeah, that's awesome. So a couple takeaways from that. We love to see owners be involved and be engaged in the actual school management, and show up and meet the parents on the tours. And the fact that she knew all the children's names and really be in it, not to mean that you have to be in it 24/7. You can still work on the business, but showing up in the business as an integral part, as a leader, right? And then telling your story. So for owners, that we really teach them, Ryan, how to tell their story and how to have confidence to tell their story, because a lot of times they don't want to be the face of their schools, or they get nervous about it. But I think it's a huge, huge game changer for owners who say, I'm in it. This is my why. This is my passion. This is why I started my school. This is my origin story. And they can tell it on video. They can do Facebook Lives. They can be there in person. They can have their story on the wall of the school. But I think it's just really important to me, the vision and the mission of the school. And that's what a lot of leadership is about, is getting people bought in to, and communicating your mission and your vision. So in a way that's really compelling and heartwarming. And for a preschool, it needs to be built on love and care. And so I love that. And thanks for bringing that out and talking about leadership in a preschool environment. So looking back at your journey so far, and you're still, I would consider you to be a youngster in your journey. So you have a lot of, I think you're going to have a lot of amazing things in front of you. But what's one thing so far that you may have done differently if you could have in your life so far?
I think the natural answer would be start earlier, but I don't know if I would say that because I was still going back to school. One of the things that I probably regret is, again, that this is because I was immature, is just the fact that I was not very well read earlier in my career. I did not really show any interest in books and reading, and I would say books are a magical thing, and they can change your life, and they cost practically nothing. And I know as an author of a book, and I know you do too, that you pour everything you have into this, and somebody else can get access to the depths of your soul for about $15. That I would push myself to be more diligent about acquiring knowledge through the power of books earlier on, instead of not. And I would say it just took me years and took me time to mature to where I grew an appreciation for that. And I think I should have started doing that earlier.
Mm-hmm. So what are a few books that you would consider to be game changers for you? Oftentimes I'll ask our podcast guests to provide 2 or 3 books that, have been either pivotal for you or just great reads right now that you can share with the listeners.
So one of the first books I've ever read that I got deep into was Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini, who I also had on my podcast. Influence is a big one. Give and Take by Adam Grant helped me develop a love for reading and also change my viewpoint on the world. My background's extremely competitive. When you play quarterback in college, only one guy gets to play. It's very black and white. If I win, the other guy loses. If he wins, I lose. When you get out in the real world, that's not how it works. Everybody can literally win in what you're doing. I'm in a keynote speakers group with 350 people. All of us can win helping one another. None of us have to lose. In the quarterbacking world, that's not how it is. Give and Take showed me how becoming a giver and being generous and helping others is the path to winning. And both of you can win, and you can have win-win situations on a regular basis. So that changed how I view the world. And because of that impact on me, it changed how I viewed reading and really helped me dive deeper into books. And then I guess if I named a third one, I would say David McCullough has written a number of great books, but his one called The Wright Brothers. Again, they're from here in Dayton, Ohio. Their bicycle shop's right down the street from where I live. So that one's kind of close to me. But regardless of where you live, that is a fascinating book about 3 people, Orville and Wilbur, as well as their sister, and the role they played in going up against amazing amount of competition of people who were better funded both abroad and here at home. Yet against all those odds, through some failed experiments, through people dying, bad things happening, they prevailed. And that is a story that we all should know. And David McCullough is a master storyteller. And that's why there's a lot of books on the Wright brothers, but that's the one to read because it's so well done. And it's one that you'll want to reread over and over. So I guess those would be 3 that I would start with if you haven't checked those out yet.
Awesome. That's great. What about your book? Tell us a little bit more about it and what compelled you to want to write it.
When I got promoted to my first management role, I worked at LexisNexis in the sales organization, and I primarily got the opportunity to interview for the job because I was at the top of the stack rankings. That's how they ranked us every day on our sales numbers. And the interesting aspect about that is because of the fact that I was able to perform at a high level for a few years as an individual contributor, that had no bearing on how good or bad I would be as a manager of a team. Now, I was able to convince them to give me the job through the interview process. And then I get the job, and I was terrible at it. I could go and do the job as a sales professional and do that well, but leading a team of 15 dynamically different personalities and understanding the communication styles with each of those individuals and being there from them and becoming a better teacher and a coach and understanding the personal lives and aspects of each of those people, it was too much. I wasn't good at it at all. And so I wrote the book that I wish I had when I got promoted. And so it is specifically for that person who either wants to be promoted, has just gotten promoted, or maybe they did a couple years ago and they still are fumbling around like I was. That's who it's for. And so it's a combination of what I learned through the course of making my own mistakes and correcting them, as well as the fact that I've been lucky to speak with hundreds of world-class leaders on my podcast, The Learning Leader Show. And so I kind of mashed all of that together, and we called it Welcome to Management, because you're going to have your welcome to management moment, and hopefully this book will help you. So my goal is that as you get promoted to a management role, you get a nice handshake and a pat on the back, and then they hand you this book and say, here's your manual, here's your guide to help you navigate these bumpy roads of what management is, because you never fully get it until you're actually doing it. And that's something I learned the hard way.
Mm-hmm. It brings to mind a question around the difference between management and leadership. And we've talked a lot about this in a course that I did around leadership recently, but talk a little bit about that differentiation and what it means to you, being a good manager versus being a good leader.
Yeah. I mean, management, there is a difference. And I think it's managing is really understanding the current constraints of where you're at, the stewardship of resources, understanding the analytics and the numbers aspects of the business. When I first got the job, I remember telling my dad, I was proud of myself, and I said, I was still stupid and immature. And I said, the management part of the job, I'm going to outsource that to some of the numbers guys on my teams and other people. I'm going to be the inspirational vision casting leader who's going to tell stories and motivate the troops. And I remember he just said, don't ever say that again. If you want to be effective at this role, you have to do all three. And I said, all three, what is that? You have to manage, you have to lead, and you have to coach. And you are a coach every day. Remember that. Your first priority is to be there with your team, coaching and helping them and supporting them. Leading, certainly you do have to set the vision. You have to align expectations, right? Be the person who has courage and can make decisions, but also have a deep understanding of the business, the numbers, the analytics, the metrics that matter. You have to know all of those things. Mm-hmm. If you think you can farm those out to someone else, you're going to be average at best. Mm-hmm. So I always say, going into those roles, think of yourself as a leader, as a manager, and as a coach if you care to be effective. And think about, like, I'm doing these three things every single day in my role, and that will give you a better chance to be more effective, because ultimately you got to get results. It doesn't matter about anything else. If as a coach, if you lose too many games, you get fired. As a manager of a sales team, as I was, if you don't hit the number and exceed it, you get fired. So ultimately, you're doing all those things with the goal of achieving and exceeding the results that are set for you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I am a strong believer in that too, Ryan. And the thing that I find that early learning leaders really struggle with leading with data. They don't embrace numbers and their marketing math and the metrics of their business and KPIs and all of those things. We really help them, but they struggle because they come from an education background and they don't love the marketing math or the business math a lot of times. So we really try to drill it down for them and make it simple. But honestly, you must do it, because if you don't have clarity on, the data of your business, you are just spinning. You're like a whirling dervish, not knowing what you need to fix to move forward and be better. So that's a message to the listeners is, hey guys, sometimes you just gotta kind of go back to basics and do, what's proven in all these other industries, which you got to measure by the data of your business. It's just a thing.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true.
Yeah. So if people want to learn more about you, where should they go? And I don't know if you want to offer anything to the audience, if they, just to go to your website, or how can they learn more and just get involved with you and get engaged with you?
Yeah. So everything is on learningleader.com. So learningleader.com gives you access to everything I've written and my podcast, The Learning Leader Show, which if you can also, if you're on your phone, you can text the word learners to 44222. So texting learners to 44222, and you get access to everything that I'm doing and up to date and updates on things that I'm doing. I try to only send one email a week, which I typically do. So it's not overburdening anybody, and I do my best for it to be useful for people to make them better as leaders.
And you do a great job, and it's amazing content, and it's really very rich content. And I love your content and just think you're doing an amazing job, Ryan. So
thanks.
Any other final thoughts that you want to share with our group before we close the podcast?
I just want to say thank you, Kris, for having me. I'm curious from your perspective, now that you've had so many conversations, what are some of the commonalities you found among your guests, or even the people that they know of the ones who have sustained excellence? I mean, that's what I love to study. Are there commonalities you found through the course of having all these conversations that really jump out to you?
Yeah. One is they take fast action. So they tend to be fast implementers and not overthink. Mm-hmm. The strategies they gain from these podcasts and from reading and developing themselves as leaders and business people, they model the success of others, and they try to plug in, gather a swipe file and then make it your own, but really try to implement and quickly take action. And so those people that we coach for that they're playing up here, and a lot of other folks that are just slow movers. It's like they're kind of moving through mud. Usually it's mindset. So we teach everything is based in mindset, and we're constantly giving people a fresh positive dose of how to be really thinking about their world right now with this COVID crisis, is how to think and focus in on success and not focus on fear, and what to be reading and watching and listening, and how to protect your brain from what's going on in the media. And so a lot of those strategies are all mindset strategies. It's habits. It's what you tell yourself when no one's watching, and listening to that self-talk, and really focused on mindset, which provides the structure for everything. So we find people that really constantly feed their mindset with books that are positive and podcasts, et cetera, will really be best in class, because they're driving everything forward from this basis of confidence and positivity. So those are just some things: fast action and constantly working on your mindset. And those are usually the people that I find are winning the game of life at the highest level. That's cool. Wow. Very cool. Good to hear. Awesome. Yeah, you flipped it on me. Look at you. The podcast host came out. Well, you've had these experiences. I can't help but be curious about some of the things you've picked up, because the power of having so many conversations. It's that compound effect of knowledge and wisdom that you gain, and then the ability to recognize patterns among people and what they've done in order to sustain excellence. I think that's something that's just interesting to me. Yeah, I love it. And I love following people that are really providing new, fresh ways of thinking across the field of leadership and business too. People like Simon Sinek and Pat Lencioni, and another one, it was just in my head and just escaped me again. But there's so many amazing people out there to help us form new ideas, positivity, and taking that best next step. It's a very cool thing. Have you ever had Simon on your podcast? Have you been able to? Yeah, I've had him on a few times. He's incredible. He's been great every time. I think we've had 3 times now, and he's nice. Always kills it. He's great. He has a great accent on top of just fantastic content that makes you really think
and always a big hit for the people who listen to my show. They love
Oh,
him.
yeah. The other one I was going to say was Dan Sullivan with Strategic Coach, which I love that guy. And he is amazing if you haven't had him. He's 75 going on 25. I mean, the guy, every time I see him, he gets younger and younger. Like he's anti-aging, like that guy. He's just incredible to me. So yeah, thank you, Ryan Hawk, for being with us today. We are super psyched to have you here on Care Rockstar Radio, and everybody go over to learningleader.com and check out Ryan. And thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Kris. Great to be here.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you liked this episode of Care Rockstar Radio. If you did, please share it with someone you know and help spread the word to your friends in our industry and on social media. Childcare business success is my passion, and I'm honored to be on this journey with you. As a thank you for listening, I'd like to give you a complimentary strategy session with one of my certified childcare business coaches who are standing by to help you get the results you seek in your business and in your life. To get your free session with a coach now, go to childcaresuccess.com. That's www.childcaresuccess.com. Take care and God bless.